This is Heather Grzalka with Madeira Public Relations, and I am here today with my friend Ryan Janot. He works in a broadcast newsroom, and we are going to be asking him some questions today on how to pitch your stories during the COVID pandemic. Hi, Ryan.
Hey, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Hey, really glad to be able to spend this time with you. So we're hearing a lot from clients, particularly our nonprofit clients, that they really need news coverage right now because they're struggling. Some of them have had to change their service operations. What kind of stories are you looking for right now?
So as a newsroom, we're getting inundated with a lot of pitches from a lot of different companies, a lot of nonprofits, a lot of organizations. So some of the things that, there's never a guarantee with a pitch, and I'm sure plenty of your clients understand that, but the things that have a better shot of making, especially TV, is, opportunities for people to be interviewed, pictures, video, especially broadcast. We're television, so we need to be able to show the story and what we're talking about, whatever that story is. So those are the keys. But we're also, because we're kind of a cross platform, some stories do better for digital. So it kind of depends. But when it comes to a pitch, we want to know the who, what, where, when, why, and we want to get right to the point with that. You don't want a long drawn out news release about an event that you're holding, or some food drive, or whatever your goal is. You want to get right to the point, because the amount of information coming into the newsroom every day is changing so quickly right now that a journalist, a news producer, a news manager, they don't have time to sit there and really read through a lot, because there's just not enough time in the day.
So what I'm hearing you say is, one, when an organization sends a newsroom information, you don't just want the information, you're hoping what comes with it are also some visual elements, whether that's video or photographs, correct?
Right. Preferably, we would like to go out there and meet you and get those types of things. But in the world we live in, where we have so much news, a lot of times it's hard to do that. So anytime you can provide, pictures, video, and an interview, that helps. Now, it won't necessarily be used, but it will provide some context as to how a producer or reporter will write the story. As I said before, it's better for us to go shoot the interview and be able to, get video of what's happening and what you're doing for your organization. But, we have a shorter staff, and we have, again, so much information coming in that it's hard to go pick out one nonprofit or one organization and profile them or something along those lines.
Right. And what do you in terms of what's happening with COVID right now, should stories have a COVID connection, or are you open to stories that maybe don't have a COVID connection at this point?
So at this current moment, if you pitch anything that's not COVID related, it likely will not get picked up. Just in the environment that we're in, and there's so many new developments within COVID, and there's so many follow-up stories to COVID. So actually, some advice would be to keep an eye on the governor, what he has to say, and then think about what they say and how you can help fill a void if there's an issue. For example, the big topic here is when is Florida going to reopen? Schools right now, schools is May 1st. A lot of companies, a lot of organizations have said, hey, we're going to offer, and this is mostly cable internet, but we're going to give away free internet. Those types of stories have a better shot of getting air because of they're reacting to what's happening in the world and in Florida. So if you pitch something that's not COVID related, it's likely not going to see the light of day at this current moment. Eventually things will turn, but not right now, I don't think.
I think that makes a lot of sense, and that's good advice. So when you're thinking about some of our nonprofits that we work with, for them, their big news or story is that they're struggling for resources. Is that, and because of the pandemic, is that something that a newsroom might cover the challenges that a nonprofit is having right now, or do they need to think of a broader news hook or angle?
So I actually think we have covered some of those stories.
Mm-hmm.
But there's so many nonprofits, there's so many different organizations that, even if you cover one, there's still 50 other ones that maybe didn't get that opportunity to talk about it. So you can that's a good start for a pitch, but
Mm-hmm.
you need another piece to kind of round it out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think at one point when we talked, I don't remember the organization, but you had an organization about like domestic violence.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's an issue that is going to be a big issue, I think, and we've talked about it in our newsroom going forward. As long as people aren't allowed to leave their homes, as long as there's no beaches open, which could change today, but those types of things. As long as people are cooped up, that's going to be a big issue. So that's a pitch where, um, you know, that organization would be able to say, hey, we're having a shortage, but we're also trying to help people in a time where people are stuck and don't have another option.
Right. So I'm hearing that what you're saying is you're looking for a lot of substance as well as solutions to make life maybe not easier now, but perhaps a little bit better and address some of the problems
Right.
that are popping up because of COVID that weren't part of our lives, a month and a half ago.
Right. Yeah. I mean, with everything that happens, there's always trickle effect. And with COVID, there's a ton of different avenues and stories that are out there, just from cancellations, and when are big events that are happening every year going to get rescheduled, and will they be rescheduled, and then like all the concerts were all canceled.
Right.
There's so many different things that come out of this. It's you just have a newsroom that doesn't necessarily have enough people to cover every single pitch or story idea that comes through every day. So just because also if you have a pitch and it doesn't get picked up once, doesn't mean it won't get picked up. And another thing is to kind of keep an eye on the brand of each organization you're pitching to. That's very important. Some people are more hard news, some people are more like advocacy type stations or organizations that want to do a story that helps people, and that's just something to keep in mind.
That's really good advice. And so when you said that sometimes you can use a pitch more than once, what are your thoughts on someone sending a pitch to all TV stations or multiple reporters at a particular station? Are you looking for exclusivity when someone sends you a story?
I would say it depends. It depends. So I think if you send a pitch to all the newsrooms, you need to make sure when you do that you curtail that pitch in some capacity to that newsroom. It also depends on your organization. If you're a public information person for a county, that pitch is likely to get picked up more than a nonprofit trying to pick up coverage. So I think you need to curtail those pitches. One other thing to that, if you're going to individually pitch to a reporter, I wouldn't pitch the same story to like 6 reporters in one newsroom, because and in the morning when they're on their conference call trying to figure out what their story is, all of those reporters are going to have that story idea that they're going to pitch. And it's going to be like, reporters talk to each other like, oh yeah, I got this story, and you got to pitch to your liking. The other thing is, it's easy for me because I work in the newsroom, but once you figure out reporters' niches and what they like to cover, and it's easier to pitch those types of stories the chances of those stories getting picked up are higher because they're going to pitch the stories that they have covered before, or if they have some sort of connection to. There's a few reporters in our newsroom who love dogs, so anytime there's a dog story, they're pitching it, and they're covering a lot of those types of stories as well. So
that's great, and it's been fun to see some of your coverage that the animal shelter has, and here at least in Pinellas, and I think Hillsborough as well, has all the dogs have been adopted.
Right.
So
Yeah, and that's a big deal, and a lot of people resonate with those types of stories. So,
yeah, it seems like we do need some positive news
yep.
right now. So it seems like there is some room, at least for that, which is nice. Can you tell me a little bit about how the schedule of the newsroom functions? That I know every morning there's a pitch meeting and there's better times of day to contact the station than others. Can you just kind of walk us through the day? Because we like to tell our clients, you know, if you're pitching an event that happens late in the afternoon or on the weekend, it's
Hmm.
less likely that someone's going to come out, or at least a camera will come out and cover the event.
Right. So, I work like the day side, night side shift. There's also the people that work overnight. So a newsroom, there's almost always someone there. The number of people obviously gets a lot smaller, especially overnights. But times that you don't want to hold an event, you know, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, um, you know, that's critical crunch time for any reporter, photographer, news producer, editor. Um, that time is very, very busy. Um, the pitch meetings, at least in the mornings, usually happen around 9:30. They usually go about an hour. So sometimes getting that pitch in to a newsroom or an individual reporter earlier before that is also a good idea. Um, Weekends, there's just less people as well. Usually, you know, at least at my station, we have a morning reporter and a morning photographer. They do the morning show, then they go out and they try to find a story for the evening shows. And then we have one photographer during the day, usually, and then we have a reporter and a photographer at night. So we really don't have a lot of leeway in where we can go. We obviously try to maximize and cover as many local stories as we can, but um, that can be difficult, especially in a market that is 4.5 hours top to bottom.
Yeah, the Tampa Bay market is a huge market, and I know we have a lot of clients who are outside of this area or even outside of this state. But
Mhm.
using Tampa Bay as a comparison, because I think we're a pretty good size city to compare to for others. On average, how many camera crews do you have during the Monday through Friday work week that could go out and cover a story?
So I think I was trying to calculate this number. I think it's between 10 and 15 cameras, but I'm not 100% totally sure on that. A
Mhm.
lot of it depends on um, what a reporter is covering that day. So like if there's a big story, maybe I'm just going to use an example, like a big court hearing in Pinellas County, which is the west side of Tampa Bay.
Mhm.
Um, the courthouse is in Clearwater, so if you pitch something in South St. Pete, and we do have a Pinellas County bureau reporter, it's likely that that team is not going to be able to cover the thing in South St. Pete
Right.
because they're 45 minutes away. But let's say on the other hand of that you have a pretty intriguing story in Clearwater, 5 minutes from X court hearing, they might be able to go. Sorry about that,
We
Tucker.
all have pets at home.
You might be able to get a camera there for 5 minutes because it's 5 minutes from the station or from the courthouse. So, being aware of what's happening in the
Mhm.
local news, being aware that, each station has specific reporters designated for a rough estimate or a rough area. News happens when it wants. So sometimes they got to break away from their bureau and go somewhere else. But, knowing those people will help you get coverage, and knowing what stories they are likely to cover that day will also help you get coverage.
That makes a lot of sense. And some of it sounds like, too, there's just a little bit of luck involved if things seem to be
Hmm.
congregating in one area. And it's my understanding that on the weekends there are fewer camera crews available, that your staff size is a little
Oh,
smaller.
much smaller. Yeah. So we have to get a little bit more creative um, in terms of how we cover stories. Not, ideally we want video and pictures and interviews and that sort of things, but sometimes you know, you don't have that. So you find a way to make a graphic that explains, this event's coming up. But, we get a lot of those pitches. So when you pitch a story and you have an event you are hoping to get coverage on, you got to think wide. You got to think wide perspective. You can't think, let's say it's like an art festival, for example, just a random one.
Mm-hmm.
Not everyone loves art. So you need to find a way to broaden that out. Maybe you have food trucks. People love food. So maybe you have food trucks at the art festival, and you can, reference back. We did this last year. We had this many people show up. It's a great thing for the community. Once you start broadening out that story, you're not pinpointing yourself into one spot.
That's good advice of thinking about the broader audience as well, and different interests and needs. We've talked a lot about pitching, and I think for anyone watching this, I think we need to define what we mean by that. And so tell me, we were talking earlier about press releases. Tell me, do you want information to come to you in a press release? What is the best way to send you story information, or what we call the pitch?
So it depends. It really depends. Knowing someone within a newsroom, building a relationship with that person, by far, in my opinion, is the way to get coverage and the way to pitch a story the best. Obviously, it's if you don't have a relationship within within the newsroom, whatever organization you're looking to get coverage from, a short email to the newsroom also works well. Answering that who, what, where, when, why, and contact information. Sometimes we get pitches, we don't even get contact information. It's like, well, how are we going to be able to send a camera crew to you if we don't know exactly where you're standing? Or so you got to remember that, like, some of just the basics. And sometimes I would say, like, when you write that email, think about, like, what would this, what would I need to know if I'm going to go do this or go to this event? I think that's sometimes missed when we get a pitch, and then we don't cover it because it's a big question that you don't have answered.
Right. How many pitches would you say on average you get a day?
I have so many pitches. I can't even count. And one thing to keep in mind is your pitch is not just coming from, your local nonprofit. You're getting pitches from big PR firms in New York City that have a client that has maybe has a doctor that can talk about COVID-19 down here. So they're pitching that all over the place.
Right.
And in the world we live in right now, a lot of, Zoom interviews, FaceTime interviews, Skype interviews. It makes it very easy for a reporter to interview those people. So I think we actually are getting more pitches because of it, because once you have the Zoom set up, you don't have to drive 30 minutes to go set up the camera, then drive 30 minutes back to the station. You can just sit at your couch and boom. So I think we actually are getting a lot more pitches now that we're in this current news cycle.
And do you think, as the result of this current news cycle, as a result of this pandemic, do you think more interviews will happen in the manner that we're talking right now over Zoom?
I think so. I don't think from a broadcast perspective that it's ideal. Obviously, the quality of these interviews, aesthetically, is lost a little bit. You don't have a nice, beautiful lit camera shot sometimes. But for the time being, the reason they're doing so many of these interviews is to kind of protect, reporters and photographers from being close to people. They're saying social distance. Well, that is why we're not going to come put a microphone on you. We're going to call you.
Right.
These are mechanisms to protect, our staff.
Right. So is there, just in wrapping up, is there anything else that not just nonprofits, but just other organizations wanting to seek news coverage that you wish people knew or did differently?
Yeah, I think remember that, you know, news is so fast moving these days, especially with this current, story, that it's very easy for pitches to get missed. It's very easy um, for information to be outdated. I mean, that's a big problem that we're having now, and it's just because it's coming so quickly that, by the time you write a story and you move on, um, what you wrote is no longer valid because there was 3 other press conferences that just happened. So keeping in mind that information is very, very fast moving, and that, you got to really, think about how to peg off some of the things that are happening in the world, um, and how to curtail it to that specific area organization that you were trying to get coverage for. And one other thing is just remember that, the people that work in the news um, are generally stressed out people. And so they need to, they need some flexibility a lot of times when it comes to, yeah, we're going to cover your story, but we need you to interview at 1 p.m., not 3 p.m., because 3 p.m. is a terrible time for them
Right.
to actually get their story on the air. And you want your reporter, especially if, if it's a positive story or you're trying to gain some traction on something, you want the reporter to have some time to put that together. And so, sometimes reporters can be a pain. I totally get it, but it's, they got to keep moving because they got to be live at 4 o'clock. They got to be live at 5 o'clock. They got a really strict deadline to hit. So
Right. Right. I really appreciate, and I know this is such a busy time for you, and so I appreciate you taking time out of your day to give our clients feedback on what you're looking for right now, and hopefully this will help us be able to get you and or anyone else who watches this some better stories. So Ryan, thank you so much for your time, and we'll talk to you soon.